The unforgiving Texas sun, a relentless golden orb in an endless cerulean sky, beat down with an unyielding intensity upon the parched earth. Heat shimmered off the distant horizon, turning the sturdy mesquite trees into dancing mirages. Here, in this vast, often brutal landscape, a lone figure moved with a quiet purpose, his silhouette etched against the glare. This was Jack, a man carved from the very land he tended, his movements deliberate, efficient, born of years spent under this same unwavering sun. Beside him, with a gait as fluid and unrestrained as the wind, was Rio, his magnificent mustang, a creature whose spirit mirrored his master's own independence. Their bond was unspoken, forged in shared journeys across dusty plains and through the hushed, star-lit nights of the Texas wilderness. Life here wasn't about fleeting trends or grand pronouncements. It was about resilience, about the honest sweat of effort and the silent rhythm of the land. Jack had inherited his modest ranch, a collection of weathered buildings and extensive, often challenging acreage from his grandfather. It was his anchor, his legacy, and his future. He wasn't a man given to grand ambitions, but rather to the steadfast pursuit of duty and the quiet joy of self-sufficiency. Rio wasn't just a horse. He was a companion, a confidant, a tireless partner in the endless work that defined Jack's days. Jack's hands, calloused and strong, spoke volumes about a life dedicated to meticulous care, whether it was mending a fence, doctoring a calf, or simply ensuring his corner of the world remained in order. He embodied the very essence of the Texan spirit, a deep-seated self-reliance tempered by an innate understanding of community, a willingness to lend a hand without a second thought. Then came the storm. It wasn't a hurricane, not even a true cyclone, but a fierce, sudden burst of wind and rain that tore through the region with surprising velocity. It came and went like a phantom, leaving behind a scattering of minor destruction. Fallen branches, scattered debris, and most notably, a section of the old wire fence on the neighboring property had been ripped from its posts, lying crumpled and useless. The sight pulled at Jack's ingrained sense of order. He saw it while riding Rio along their shared boundary, a jarring disruption in an otherwise familiar landscape. Without hesitation, without even a flicker of internal debate, Jack decided. It wasn't a question of being asked, or even a thought of personal inconvenience. It was simply what one did. A damaged fence meant potential trouble, loose cattle, and a breach in the unspoken covenant of responsible land ownership. He'd fix it. It was a neighborly duty, as natural and essential as drawing breath. He knew little about the new owner, only that the old place had recently been sold to someone from out of town, someone who hadn't yet made their presence truly felt in the small local community. He simply saw a problem, and he possessed the skills and the inclination to resolve it. The narration hints at a new, discreet owner recently arrived from Dallas, whose presence is still unknown to Jack. She had purchased the sprawling, somewhat neglected property months ago, a quiet refuge from a life she desperately sought to escape. Her arrival was as subtle as a desert breeze, a deliberate attempt to blend into the vast anonymity of rural Texas. Jack, focused on the immediate task at hand, had no idea that this simple act of kindness, this straightforward duty, would unravel a tapestry of complexities and connections far beyond anything he could ever imagine. This seemingly insignificant act, born of a cowboy's simple code, was about to intricately weave two vastly different lives together. Before we delve deeper into this unfolding story, remember to subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives that reveal the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. The Texas sun, still relentless, bore down on Jack as he worked, sweat beading on his brow and tracing paths through the dust that clung to his skin. He moved with a practiced rhythm, each swing of the hammer, each twist of the wire, a testament to years spent mending and building. Rio, his patient mustang, occasionally nudged his hand, a silent request for an ear scratch, or simply stood sentinel nearby, his coat gleaming in the harsh light. Jack didn't rush, ensuring every post was set deep, every strand of barbed wire taut and properly secured. He was a man who believed in doing things right, not just for the visible surface, but for the unseen integrity beneath. This fence, though not his own, received the same meticulous attention he gave to his own property, a silent promise of lasting repair against future storms. He imagined the unseen neighbor, perhaps a newcomer from some distant city, appreciating the solid work, the kind of work that spoke louder than any words. He knew the land, knew its demands, and respected the silent contract between a man and his labor. Several days later, the repairs completed and the fence standing strong, Jack was already back to his own routines when he first saw her. Emily Carter, the new owner, emerged from the modest ranch house that had stood empty for months. She moved with an understated elegance, a stark contrast to the rugged landscape. Her attire, though practical for the Texas heat, still hinted at a world far removed from dusty boots and calloused hands. She hesitated at the porch, then walked slowly towards the freshly mended fence, her eyes scanning the new posts and tightly strung wire. Jack, who was mending a bridle near his barn, watched her from a distance. His first thought was a familiar one for many longtime residents, another city person, probably from Dallas, trying to make a go of rural life. He'd seen them come and go, often unprepared for the demanding realities of ranch living. She seemed, to his eye, almost out of place, a delicate flower in a field of hardy cacti. What Jack couldn't possibly know, as he observed her quiet inspection, was the true weight of Emily Carter's past. The narrator, however, knows her secret. Emily wasn't just another urban transplant. She was Emily Carter, the sole heiress to the vast Carter oil fortune, a name synonymous with power and immense wealth throughout Texas. She had indeed recently arrived from Dallas, not to conquer the rural landscape, but to escape it. The relentless pressure of her family's name, the suffocating expectations, the endless social obligations, and the constant scrutiny had driven her to seek refuge in this quiet corner, hoping to find a semblance of a normal, anonymous life. She yearned for authenticity, a life unburdened by her golden shackles. Their first direct interactions were brief, a polite nod from her as she passed his property boundary, a curt ma'am from him as he tipped his hat. Their exchanges, though cordial, were marked by an almost imperceptible distance, a silent acknowledgement of their differing worlds. Jack remained blissfully unaware of her colossal wealth, treating her with the same respectful, slightly detached manner he would anyone else. Emily, for her part, was unaccustomed to such genuine, uncalculating interactions. Most people either fawned over her or resented her wealth. Jack simply worked, his earnestness a refreshing anomaly. Yet despite the unacknowledged chasm between them, a subtle curiosity began to flicker. Emily found herself intrigued by Jack's quiet strength, his unwavering diligence. She watched him work with Rio, the unspoken communication between man and beast, resonating with an ancient harmony. She noticed the way he cared for his land, the almost reverent respect he showed for the cycles of nature. Jack, in turn, found himself pondering the quiet woman next door. She wasn't like the other city folk. She didn't complain, didn't try to change everything overnight. She simply observed, absorbed, and sometimes he caught her eyes on him, a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. These small, fleeting moments, a shared glance across the dusty expanse, a quiet appreciation for the sunset painting the sky, began to etch the faintest lines of a nascent connection, a bond forming beyond their initial superficial understanding, unnoticed by either, yet undeniably there. The days rolled into weeks, each sunrise bringing with it a quiet rhythm that began to pull Jack and Emily into a more frequent orbit. Their conversations, initially punctuated by polite formalities concerning the fence or the weather, slowly deepened. Jack would often find himself needing to retrieve a stray calf near the boundary line, invariably leading to a brief but meaningful exchange with Emily, perhaps about a particularly stubborn gait or the quality of a recent rain. Emily, in turn, might be tending to a new patch of wildflowers she'd planted near her porch, and Jack, passing by on Rio, would offer a comment on their resilience, sparking another moment of connection. These were not grand encounters, but small, organic interactions that wove themselves into the fabric of their daily lives, steadily reducing the invisible distance between them. Jack's world remained refreshingly simple, ordered by the demands of the land and the needs of his animals. His concerns rarely stretched beyond the next rainfall, the health of his herd, or the integrity of his fences. He was a man of tangible truths, where effort directly correlated with outcome. Emily, however, carried an unseen layer of complexity beneath her composed exterior. Jack, still oblivious to her true provenance, saw her as a woman seeking solace from the city's hustle, perhaps a bit out of her element, but undeniably resilient. He admired her quiet determination, her quick grasp of rural necessities, and the genuine way she seemed to appreciate the stark beauty of the Texas landscape. He recognized a kindred spirit in her appreciation for the simple, unadorned life, unaware that this was precisely what she had been searching for. Emily, on the other hand, observed Jack with a discerning eye. She was accustomed to men who saw her as a reflection of her family's fortune, their intentions often masked by a veneer of charm or ambition. Jack was different. He saw a neighbor, a woman who needed a fence repaired, a fellow inhabitant of this vast, quiet land. His selflessness, evident in his immediate decision to fix her fence without seeking recompense, was a stark contrast to the transactional relationships she'd grown used to. He was genuine, unpretentious, and his kindness felt utterly pure. She found herself increasingly drawn to his easy confidence, his quiet strength, and the way his eyes held a steady, honest light. He never asked about her past, never probed her for details about her life before the ranch. He simply accepted her as she was, here and now, a revolutionary concept for her. The ranch itself became a silent, yet powerful catalyst for their evolving relationship. The sprawling acres, the demanding cycles of nature, and the shared experience of living in such an elemental place provided a natural stage for their interactions. They might discuss the best time to plant certain crops, the challenges of predatory wildlife, or the subtle signs of changing weather. These were not intellectual debates, but practical conversations grounded in the reality of their shared environment. Each shared observation, each mutual appreciation for the stark beauty around them, chipped away at the initial barriers that separated them. A foundation of mutual respect began to solidify. Jack respected Emily's quiet fortitude, her willingness to tackle new challenges, and her understated elegance even amidst the dust and heat. Emily admired Jack's unwavering integrity, his deep connection to the land, and the easy manner in which he navigated a world so foreign to her past. It was a respect built not on shared history or social standing, but on observed character and genuine actions. They were two individuals, ostensibly from different worlds, finding common ground in the vast open spaces of Texas. Yet underneath Emily's calm exterior, the weight of her secret began to press. Each passing day, each genuine smile from Jack, each moment of shared silence felt like another stone added to the burden. She yearned to be completely transparent with him, to shed the veneer of her assumed identity, but the fear of changing his perception, of introducing the complexities of her past into his beautifully straightforward world, held her captive. She worried that the truth might shatter the delicate connection they were building, that her wealth would become a wall between them, rather than a bridge. One sweltering afternoon, as they watched a distant storm gather on the horizon, Emily uncharacteristically confessed a flicker of her inner turmoil. Sometimes, she began, her voice barely a whisper against the rising wind, it feels like I'm living two lives, one that everyone sees, and one that only I truly know. She didn't elaborate, and Jack, sensing a vulnerability she rarely displayed, simply nodded, his gaze distant, but his presence a silent anchor. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible, crack in her carefully constructed facade, a hint of the deeper emotions simmering beneath the surface, a silent plea for understanding that resonated in the vast, open silence of the Texas plains. Weeks melted into months, each day weaving Jack and Emily's lives more intimately together. What began as polite, distant exchanges had blossomed into frequent, often spontaneous shared moments. They found themselves gravitating towards each other, their paths crossing with an increasing ease that felt both natural and inevitable. Sometimes it was working side by side on a loose fence post, the rhythm of their movements a silent synchronicity. Other times, it was Rio's playful nuzzle against Emily's hand as she helped Jack feed the horses. A small shared intimacy that spoke volumes. The evenings often found them on the porch of her modest ranch house, the Texas sun bleeding brilliant oranges and purples across the vast sky. They'd share simple meals, sometimes venison Jack had hunted, sometimes vegetables Emily had grown in a small burgeoning garden she'd started. Their conversations flowed easily, ranging from the mundane details of ranch life to deeper reflections on the quiet beauty of their surroundings. Emily found herself confiding in Jack in ways she hadn't anticipated, sharing observations about the wildlife, expressing her newfound appreciation for the rhythms of nature, and even hinting at her desire for a life less complicated than the one she'd left behind. Jack in turn spoke of his family's long history on the land, his passion for working with animals, and his steadfast belief in honest labor. Jack's unwavering steadfastness and genuine kindness were slowly but surely chipping away at the carefully constructed walls around Emily's heart. He never pushed, never pried, simply offered a steady presence, a quiet understanding that bypassed her usual defenses. She realized with a startling clarity that his presence was reminding her of a simpler life she had always craved, a life unburdened by expectations and the crushing weight of her family's legacy. He saw Emily, the woman who loved the smell of rain on dry earth. Not Emily Carter, the heiress. This unconditional acceptance was a balm to her soul, healing wounds she hadn't realized were so deep. Then a sudden jarring reminder of her past intruded upon their peaceful existence. A package arrived for Emily bearing the unmistakable return address of a prominent Dallas law firm, sealed with her family's crest. The sight of it brought a cold dread to her stomach, a stark contrast to the warmth she had grown accustomed to in Jack's company. She quickly tucked it away, but the brief encounter with her old world left a subtle tension in the air. The unspoken question of her true identity, of the life she had so meticulously hidden, suddenly loomed larger, casting a shadow over their otherwise bright moments. An internal conflict raged within Emily. Her desire to be completely honest with Jack, to lay bare her entire truth, warred fiercely with the deep-seated fear of losing the beautiful, uncomplicated connection they were building. Would he recoil from her wealth? Would he see her as another pampered socialite, rather than the woman who cherished the dust on her boots and the calluses on her hands? The thought of his perception of her changing, of the easy trust between them dissolving, sent a pang of genuine fear through her. Meanwhile, Jack's feelings for Emily had deepened immeasurably. What started as simple neighborly respect had quietly transformed into something far more profound. He found himself thinking of her constantly, anticipating her next visit, cherishing her quiet laughter. Her presence felt like a missing piece he hadn't known was absent from his life. He still believed her to be a quiet city woman seeking refuge in the country, perhaps a little naive, but utterly captivating. He admired her resilience, her gentle spirit, and the way she embraced the challenges of rural life with a quiet determination. His affection grew with each shared sunset, each knowing glance, each moment revealing another layer of her captivating personality. One blustery afternoon, a sudden, unexpected downpour turned the dry creek bed into a raging torrent, threatening to wash out the only access road to Emily's property. Without hesitation, Jack sprang into action, his years of experience with the unforgiving Texas landscape guiding him. Emily, watching him work with an intensity born of necessity, felt an unprecedented surge of trust. She followed his rapid-fire instructions, helping him shore up a makeshift barrier with stones and fallen branches, her hands muddy, her hair plastered to her face. In that moment of shared urgency, of relying on his strength and knowledge to protect her home, a powerful, unspoken bond solidified. It was a test of trust, a visceral understanding that went beyond words, highlighting her reliance on his genuine character and the profound sense of safety she felt in his presence. The truth of her identity remained a secret, but the truth of their connection was undeniable. The quiet confession, a mere whisper against the gathering storm, had been a prelude, an almost unconscious reaching out from Emily, marking the beginning of the end for her carefully constructed secret. Each subsequent day, as her feelings for Jack deepened, the weight of her deception became almost unbearable. It felt like living a lie, not just to him, but to herself, compromising the authenticity of the burgeoning connection she cherished more with each passing moment. Her laughter with him, her shared observations of the ranch and its rhythms, all felt tainted by the unspoken truth that lay between them, a chasm waiting to open. Then inevitably the outside world intruded, forcing Emily's hand. A sleek black sedan, utterly out of place on the dusty, unpaved road leading to her ranch, appeared one scorching afternoon. It carried her family's estate lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man whose very presence embodied the privileged, complex world she had so desperately tried to escape. He delivered a thick portfolio of documents pertaining to a new trust fund, a portfolio that reeked of her family's vast oil empire and their incessant need to control her life, even from a distance. His visit was a stark, jarring reminder of the life she'd left behind, forcing her to confront the almost irreconcilable differences between the Emily her family knew and the Emily Jack was coming to know. The contrast was almost comical, yet deeply unsettling. The crisp, formal clothes of Henderson against the backdrop of the rough, honest ranch, the polished briefcase resting on her rustic kitchen table, all screamed a reality that Jack was entirely oblivious to. That evening, as the Texas sky bled into hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the land, Emily found Jack mending a saddle in his barn, the scent of leather and dust filling the air. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it. She couldn't postpone it any longer. Taking a deep breath, her voice barely steady, she began, "Jack, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." He looked up, his brow furrowed slightly at the unusual seriousness in her tone, his hands pausing in their work. "I haven't been entirely honest about who I am. My real name is Emily Carter, yes, but I'm not just a city girl who moved to the country for a change of pace. I'm an oil heiress, Jack, from one of the biggest families in Texas. That ranch, this life, it's all my attempt to escape what comes with that name, that money." Jack's reaction was a mixture of stunned silence and profound disbelief. He slowly lowered the saddle to the ground, his eyes, usually so warm and understanding, now held a bewildered, almost wounded expression. A flicker of something that looked like betrayal crossed his face, not because she was wealthy, but because she hadn't trusted him with the truth. He had seen her as a woman seeking solace and a simpler life, a kindred spirit in some ways, and the revelation that she commanded such immense wealth, that she lived in a world so far removed from his own, was a shock to his foundational assumptions. He stood there, his sturdy frame suddenly seeming a little less grounded, as if the earth beneath him had shifted. The class divide, once an invisible suggestion, now manifested as a palpable chasm between them. The gentle ease that had grown between them evaporated, replaced by an awkward, heavy silence. He saw the expensive boots she wore, the quality of her clothes, the effortless grace in her movements, and suddenly, they weren't just details. They were badges of a world he knew nothing about, a world that seemed to mock his humble existence. He felt a sting of pride, a sense of being played, even though he knew intellectually that Emily's intent had never been malicious. The simplicity he cherished, the straightforwardness of his life, felt suddenly inadequate against the backdrop of her immense fortune. For the next few days, a temporary distance settled between them. The easy banter ceased, replaced by stilted conversations about mundane ranch tasks. Their eyes, which once sought each other out across the fields, now often avoided contact. Jack retreated into his work, finding solace in the predictable routines of the ranch, his mind grappling with the image of Emily, the oil heiress, and Emily, the woman he was falling for. Emily, in turn, felt a deep ache, seeing the hurt and confusion in his eyes, realizing the magnitude of the barrier her secret had created. Both were forced to reevaluate everything, their feelings, their perceptions of each other, and the fragile future they might have once envisioned. The truth, finally out in the open, felt less like a relief and more like an earthquake, shaking the very foundations of their budding connection. The tension that had quietly simmered beneath their polite interactions for weeks finally boiled over one sweltering evening, not in an argument, but in a quiet, devastating misunderstanding. Jack, after another day spent helping Emily mend a stubborn section of fence, had casually mentioned a local land auction, suggesting that if she ever needed more grazing land for her horses, it was an opportunity not to be missed. He thought he was being helpful, perhaps even hinting at a shared future. Emily, however, heard only the echo of every developer, every speculator, every opportunist who had ever approached her family, seeing an opening to exploit their wealth. "My horses have plenty of grazing land, Jack," she replied, her voice clipped, a sudden coolness descending that he hadn't heard before. "And I assure you acquiring more land through an auction isn't a priority for me." Her tone, though measured, carried an edge of defensiveness. A wall suddenly erected between them. Jack, stung by what he perceived as a dismissive and almost arrogant rebuttal to his well-intentioned advice, simply nodded curtly, the easy camaraderie of the day evaporating into the humid evening air. He rode off shortly after, a knot of confusion and hurt tightening in his stomach. He couldn't quite place the source of her sudden frostiness, but it felt intimately tied to the chasm he now sensed between their worlds. Jack spent the next few days wrestling with his own preconceived notions about wealth and status. He had always prided himself on seeing people for who they were, not what they had. Yet, Emily's offhand comment, combined with her earlier cryptic remark about living two lives, had sent his mind spiraling into assumptions. He imagined her as aloof, perhaps even condescending, judging his simple life and small ranch. Was she just playing at being a country woman, only to retreat to her gilded cage when the reality of hard work became too much? He felt a flicker of betrayal, then shame for his own quick judgment. He realized his initial perception of her as a city dweller was rooted in a bias he hadn't known he possessed, a bias that now seemed to confirm itself with every imagined slight. He was grappling not just with Emily, but with the prejudices he unknowingly harbored. Meanwhile, Emily was just as distraught. The auction comment had triggered a deep-seated fear, the fear of being seen primarily as her fortune, of every interaction being tainted by the vast shadow of her family's wealth. She yearned for Jack to see her, not the heiress, not the name, not the money. She confided in her elderly housekeeper, Maria, a kind woman who'd been with her family for decades, and offered a grounding wisdom. "He sees my money, Maria," Emily lamented, her voice thick with unshed tears. "He thinks I'm detached, that I don't care about the land, about the things he cares about. I just want to be loved for who I am, not for what my family owns." With Jack, I felt free. He offered a refuge I never thought possible, a chance to be authentic. Maria simply held her hand, knowing the true burden Emily carried. Their forced distance was broken by an unforeseen external event, A late-season hailstorm, unusually violent and prolonged, swept through the region, decimating crops and tearing through several sections of fencing across both their properties, including the vital cattle gates. The sheer scale of the damage was overwhelming, threatening to release Jack's herd onto Emily's land and into unfenced public areas. With local contractors overwhelmed, Jack found himself facing a monumental repair job alone. Emily, seeing the devastation, didn't hesitate. She arrived at his ranch, not with apologies, but with a truckload of supplies she'd swiftly procured from a distant hardware store that somehow still had stock, and more importantly, with her sleeves rolled up, ready to work. There was no need for words, only action. The storm, in its destructive fury, had inadvertently forged a shared challenge that transcended their personal conflict. As they worked side by side, hammering posts, stringing wire, their hands calloused and bodies aching, the triviality of their earlier misunderstanding faded. The rhythm of their labor, the unspoken coordination, the shared goal of protecting their livelihoods, created an undeniable bond. Through their actions, they discovered that their shared values of hard work, integrity, and genuine connection far outweighed their social differences. Jack saw Emily not as an heiress, but as a determined woman, covered in mud and sweat, fiercely protecting her animals and helping him protect his. Emily saw Jack not as a man who judged her wealth, but as a steadfast partner in a crisis, his strength and resilience a steady comfort. The physical barrier of the broken fences became a metaphor for the emotional walls they were dismantling. As the last section of fence was secured and the Texas sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, they both realized the depth of their feelings, acknowledging the possibility of a future together. It would require overcoming their fears and societal expectations, but watching the secure cattle graze peacefully, they began to envision how their two very different worlds might intersect and blend, creating something new and uniquely their own. The storm had cleared more than just the air, it had cleared a path. The silence that settled between Jack and Emily after the last fence post was driven deep into the hardened earth was different from any silence they had known before. It was not the awkward quiet of unspoken secrets or lingering resentment. It was a comfortable, profound stillness, filled with unspoken understanding and the quiet hum of two souls finally aligned. They stood for a moment, shoulders almost touching, watching the last vestiges of daylight fade, the air cool and clean after the storm. The wind, once a destructive force, now whispered promises of renewal through the mesquite trees. Their hands, roughened by work, instinctively found each other, fingers intertwining, a silent pact forged in sweat and shared effort. They had chosen to embrace their unique connection, deciding, without needing to articulate it fully, that their love and shared values were infinitely more important than external circumstances or societal expectations. The vast chasm of wealth that once seemed insurmountable now felt like a mere crack in the solid ground they stood upon together. Jack no longer saw Emily's fortune as a barrier, but as simply another facet of her life, one that brought certain advantages, certainly, but did not define her true spirit or her capacity for kindness and hard work. He had learned to separate the heiress from the woman who tirelessly repaired fences, who laughed genuinely, and whose eyes held a depth he was only just beginning to explore. Emily, in turn, fully accepted Jack's world, not as a step down, but as a grounding, vital existence that she had longed for, often unknowingly. She recognized the richness and challenges each of their backgrounds brought to the relationship. Her resources, once a source of guilt and isolation, now represented an opportunity. Jack's practical skills, his deep knowledge of the land, his unwavering integrity, these were treasures she valued above any material wealth. They were not attempting to erase their pasts, but to integrate them, weaving two distinct tapestries into a brilliant new design. A new beginning unfolded before them, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet confidence of shared purpose. Emily began to explore ways her financial acumen could genuinely benefit the ranch and the local community, not just her own property. She proposed sustainable farming initiatives, funded infrastructure improvements that would benefit neighboring ranchers, and even looked into setting up a local scholarship fund. All ideas born from discussions with Jack and his deep understanding of local needs. Jack, with her encouragement, considered expanding his herd, knowing Emily's savvy could help navigate the financial complexities and potential investments. They were building a life together, not just a shared residence, but a shared future, integrating Emily's resources with Jack's practical skills and his abiding love for the land. Their love story became a quiet legend in the small Texas community, a powerful message about finding love in the most unexpected of places. It was a testament to the triumph of genuine connection over superficial differences, a living example of how true hearts could create a life true to themselves, unburdened by the weight of others' expectations. The gossip eventually faded, replaced by respect for the couple who worked so diligently, who contributed so much, and whose happiness was undeniably authentic. They proved that love, when rooted in mutual respect and shared values, could indeed bridge any divide. On a clear, warm evening months later, Jack and Emily sat on the wide porch of his ranch house, watching Rio, Jack's faithful mustang, graze peacefully in the pasture. The fences, expertly repaired and strengthened, gleamed faintly in the twilight. Emily leaned into Jack, her head resting on his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. Hand in hand, they looked out at the vast expanse of their shared ranch, the sky above them a canvas of fading purples and oranges. Their journey had been unexpected, filled with twists and turns, but standing together, grounded in their love and their land, they looked towards a shared future, a future they were building brick by brick, fence post by fence post, heart by heart. Their smiles were radiant, reflecting the quiet joy of finding home in each other. If this story of unexpected love and genuine connection resonated with you, please make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling tales that remind us of the extraordinary within the ordinary. Join us next time as we delve into another incredible true story, perhaps one about a young doctor who leaves a bustling